Ladies and gentlemen,
Live from the van down by the river.
Starring Mike
Murray and
Nicole.
Rovine.
This
is
SNL.
SNL By The Numbers.
Numbers.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to SNL By The Numbers. We are back yet again for another week. It's another week. That means we're here. We've got a lot going on. We have a lot to talk about. It's going to be a fun episode. No one's going to cry. And if anyone cries, it has nothing to do with... Here we go. No, I'm feeling great. This is actually wonderful. I'm feeling amazing. I actually have never cried before. That's just something about me. Crying is something I'm unfamiliar with. So that's how I'm doing. In all seriousness, I'm very happy to be here and I'm going to have a great time. And I can see that Mike has been a really good friend to me today, actually. And I'm very happy and grateful for him. So Mike, in addition to being a good friend to me, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. If you start crying, I'll start crying. Just for solidarity reasons exclusively. But other than that, it's a good week because this is a week that happens every 2 years in this country where everyone's really interested in percentages and counting. So if we get more patrons on this podcast, maybe I'll have like a big screen and I can zoom in on like Maricopa County and stuff like that to do SNL stats with you guys. So
that
we can dream
is a
big.
Great point. Yeah, and it is a week where these things are important. I've been watching the news. It's election week if you're here at some other point in time. So yeah, or the elections just happened. So we're coming off of that. And
Yeah,
of course,
so I
we
need
have
a
Dave
big
Chappelle
screen
coming up.
and then just we'll do some live stats that way. And then I would be remiss if I didn't, before we get going with this awesome episode, that tonight is the 200th episode of the Saturday Night Network of our podcast, and we have had 200 very different episodes from a long journey over the past few years, and it's been listened to and watched over 266,000 times. So that includes roundtables, hot take shows, superfan takeovers, and of course SNL By The Numbers. We couldn't be doing what we're doing without all those people who have watched and listened that many times. So thank you to all our fans, especially the patrons. And thank you to John Schneider and my co-host, Nicole.
Yes, I think it is only fitting that we have a huge numerical milestone episode on a By The Numbers show. It's just something that feels very good and satisfying. And that's a reason to cry. Anyways, it's
many
Tears
reasons.
of Joy. Tears of Joy. It's also Scorpio season. So don't make me cry. I was also threatening to sing before we started. I started singing and then I was like, oh, no one wants to hear me sing. I can barely sing. Anyways, I'm a little loopy this time, but fortunately it is me and two very talented stats people in the chat today. So I feel like I can be a little loopy and I will be okay. So joining us, our very special guest who we're so excited about is Eric, aka at SNLytics, who you may have seen on Twitter recently doing a lot of cool stats. And we are so excited to be collaborating with him on this podcast. He's going to bring his own stats and his own stuff like Mike usually does. We have another statistician in the room. So Eric, thank you so much for being here. And how are you doing?
Thanks, Nicole. Yeah, I'm doing pretty well. Mike, when you said that this was a week where people are thinking about numbers and percentages, all I could think about was daylight savings time ending for some reason, because that has thrown me off all week. And the elections happen too. That's important. But I am just having a very strange week. I'm going on vacation next week, so I had to wrap up a bunch of stuff for work. And it's been a weird week, but these are the types of numbers I want to talk about here. I don't want to talk about work. I want to talk about SNL.
I feel that. I think we all feel that. So yeah, I think it was a really good episode to talk about. We're in the middle of the Amy Schumer episode and the Dave Chappelle episode, which I know people have mixed feelings about. I certainly have mixed feelings about this upcoming episode. But I think that for today, we have a lot of fun numbers to talk about. And so that's what we're going to do, you know, and we appreciate everybody being here to be numbers with us, numbers. So I think that, well, actually, I do have one more question, Eric. So we always ask every guest on the By the Numbers shows just for a temperature check of the season, which, by the way, Mike, I feel like we should find, since we always do the temperature check, let's brainstorm a different way to say that. That's like has a number spin on it, like a thermometer, something that adds the number to it. Anyway, Eric, back to you.
Yeah, I mean, we could just draw a big thermometer and I can get a red marker and just like color it in as we go on.
Yeah, Boston. Yeah. I think we should
we'll thermostats. Thermostats.
Maybe. Bingo! That's excellent. No, that's brilliant.
Bringing the heat.
So, bringing the heat. Incredible. So, what is your thermostat, Eric, on just in general this season so far, and you know, as it relates to numbers, but just generally, what's your vibe?
I think I am almost settled in to this season. I think it's been a rocky start. I haven't felt crazy confident leaving any episode on the first viewing, but I think that this is the season where multiple viewings help a lot. And I don't know if it's because you know, the sketches seem a little bit more scatterbrained, and it takes a couple times to really get all the jokes that are in there. But I'm enjoying it so far. It has not been my favorite season, but I'm along for the ride. So
totally agree, Eric, on the multiple viewings, because some sketches that I've like thought were like pretty abject bad sketches have turned into like pretty funny ones. So if you're not someone who's ever does that and you're a one and done viewer, I suggest doing that once in a while, because things do almost always get better. They rarely get worse. And while Nicole prepares our first slide this evening, I want to just ask Eric, why do you think SNL and stats like make a good match? Because it's obviously something that, you know, we're very lucky to have you in our chats and interacting with our shows, and you started doing some yourself recently. So why do you think this show lends itself so well to numbers and stats?
Yeah, a couple of reasons. First, there's 48 years of statistics. Like, there's 48 years of data. There's a lot of data. You can make a lot of you know, inferences that have a solid backing to them. But second, it's a show that changes, and it's important that it changes. You know, cast members come and go, and the entire trajectory of a cast member's career can be, you know, sort of cemented by how well or poorly that they perform on the show. And being able to track that over time is I think really, really important and really valuable. I've done some, you know, projects in the past where I've looked at the stats on various television shows. I used to do character line counts on The Office and Lost and a couple of other shows, and that's all interesting stuff. But like, it doesn't have a lot of value beyond just being cool to look at from time to time. I think that SNL, just by the nature of how the show evolves and changes, and the people behind it, really benefits from what we're doing here. So yeah, that's why.
Yeah, well said. I mean, I think I always love hearing a good SNL stats mission statement. So thanks for indulging me. But yeah, I totally agree. I think it's the live aspect. It's that it's changing, and that it's just because it's unpredictable. I think that's what I totally agree with you. So we're going to look at the screen time now for the Amy Schumer Steve Lacy episode last week. And so this actually, this is a little behind the scenes, behind the curtain, because we have the actual, my workbook that I always send to Nicole when she makes those beautiful graphics you see on social media, that has the breakdown of everything. So if you're looking at the screen on YouTube with us right now, it's, you know, it's a lot of numbers, not just the master list. So I'm going to defer to Nicole to read them out. But yeah, this has for the cold open on everything and how long each person appeared in those segments. So yeah, go for it, Nicole.
Yes. Yeah, we thought this week we would try doing a little bit of a behind the scenes, look at really all of the stuff that Mike does. So when I make those like very, clean and simple graphics that are like look very easy, behind that is this, thousands of hours of work that Mike has put in over these years. So we thought it would be fun to take a look at it this way. Let us know if you like looking at this view in addition to the other view that makes all of Mike's amazing work look like anyone could do it, which truly, again,
truly the Jekyll and Hyde of SNL stats is what's being shown here.
No. Anyone could do the way that I do these charts. I'm happy to always show anybody how I do those. That anyone can learn. But this, again, amazing. So, okay, I'm going to read these out. So in order from most screen time downwards, we have Amy Schumer with 26 minutes, 36 seconds. Cecily with 12 minutes, 19 seconds. Huge number. Got to talk about that. James Austin Johnson, 8 minutes, 15 seconds. Heidi Gardner, 7 minutes, 33 seconds. Steve Lacy, 7 minutes, 23 seconds. Kenan Thompson, 6 minutes, 57 seconds. Colin Jost, 5 minutes, 40 seconds. Chloe Feynman, 5 minutes, 2 seconds. Andrew Dismukes, 4 minutes, 56 seconds. Bowen Yang, 4 minutes, 42 seconds. Sarah Sherman, 4 minutes, 28 seconds. Michael Longfellow, 3 minutes, 56 seconds. Ego Wodum, 3 minutes, 53 seconds. Marcelo Hernandez, 2 minutes, 58 seconds. Michael Che, 2 minutes, 27 seconds. Mikey Day, 1 minute, 34 seconds. Molly Carney, 1 minute, 7 seconds. Steve Higgins, 25 seconds. Punky Johnson, 18 seconds. And Devin Walker, 5 seconds. So, Mike, starting with you, anything you want to point out to the listeners about this and anything that you want to highlight?
Yeah, for sure. When I was watching the episode live, it got to a point in the night where I was like, wow, this show is still going. And I don't mean 48 seasons. I mean that it was like late in the night and they were kept doing live sketches. So there's 15 unique segments in this episode, including monologue, cold open, 2 musical performances, weekend update, all that. So normally we get 12, sometimes 13 if we have a couple of short pre-tapes. But the fact that this had 15 segments, it just, it still was a 90-minute runtime, from 11:30 to 1. But they packed a lot in there. And I looked back at all the episodes I'd done data on, and I couldn't find a single one that had 15 or more segments other than the SNL at Homes. So that right away was just like pretty crazy. And then hearing the awful news that Amy posted about her son being sick and how she missed rehearsals and stuff, you would have think that maybe they would have, cut a few sketches to rehearse and kind of just went with a lower number to fill in the work week there. So that stood out. And then just, Amy Schumer as a host, which I'd love to get Eric and Nicole, your opinion on how she did, but also high screen time for Amy. And going in, we usually know that if a stand-up is hosting, they get high screen time because of a high monologue. But her monologue was pretty normal. So average monologue is 440, like perfect pitch, and then average stand-up monologue is like 7.5. She was like right in the middle. So it wasn't, too much longer than the average monologue. So the fact that she has such a high screen time stood out to me. And she had more screen time than our last 3 double duty hosts, Jack Harlow, Meg Thee Stallion, and Lizzo. So, Amy Schumer didn't do 2 musical performances and still outscored the screen. So those are my highlights.
Yeah. Also, Eric, just before one more thing I want to point out, just for full context for everyone, we also always ask every week on social media which cast member everyone would think, before we have this information, who would you guess got the most screen time? And Cecily was the most common answer with 59%. Heidi followed with 27%, then Chloe with 5%, Andrew Smukes and Bowen Yang both with 4%. So that's just some context. We always like to talk about, the perception and the sentiment and the feeling versus the, hard facts that you cannot argue with, and kind of the intersection of that is, I feel like, what we love and why we're here. So Eric, what else would you want to point out about this?
So I was about to say that it really feels like JAJ is coming into his own as a utility player. because I was really surprised to see his number that high. But I totally forgot about the cold open for some reason. So that point is moot. But I'm still glad to see him so high. I know that people had been a little bit worried that he was getting left by the wayside. So I'm glad he really got his chance to shine this week. But I also feel like we have a lot of really good utility players this season. That this week it was obvious to me that Cecily got the most screen time, but after her, I couldn't name the second person for the life of me who would have had the second most. And I think that's just because there are so many players who can do a lot of great things in their sketches, but they're not, stealing the spotlight so much. And the ones that are, I think, are in, one or two sketches a week. Like Andrew Dismukes will always have his Andrew Dismukes sketch. It seems like Sarah has had her Sarah Sherman sketch, but there's not, cast members that are really hogging every sketch from week to week. So, and then as far as Amy goes, I mean, that's a pretty high number, right, Mike, compared to other hosts?
Yeah, it was actually right below Miles Teller, who we all know was on screen the whole cold open. So that really boosted his number.
Right. Yeah.
But that was, such an outlier. Miles Teller being not a stand-up comedian, not a former cast member or former writer. I mean, he really stands out, so for them to be so similar, it's like so far them and then everybody is sort of the vibe. I think we're gonna, as I've said, we're gonna look back at all of these episodes and be like, whoa, Miles Teller, he was up there, I feel like that's every week I somehow bring that up. I just think, we're gonna come back to that, be like, whoa, he was amazing. But yeah, anyways, I think I will now show the power rankings, and this kind of adds more context. Mike creates these power rankings, as we know, to kind of tell a deeper story. In addition to this screen time, what are some other variables at play? And that's what this is as I pull it up.
Yeah, and the power rankings we do on this show is really just to look at the whole season, because we're doing the stats week to week with you guys. So the power rankings just kind of say, how are they averaging overall? So now we're at 5 episodes, SNL season, usually 20, 21 episodes. So we really have believe it or not, we're a quarter of the way there. So we have a good sample size. And yeah, so when we see the power rankings, I did include their scores for each episode, just if you want to take a look, but we're looking at the average of all 5. Nicole?
Here we go, everyone. Some dramatic silence for the YouTube listeners. It'll be our little secret. If you're on YouTube, then you'll hear some fun silence. And if you're on audio, you'll never hear this. That's what's fun about being live. Anyways,
we'll
here we go.
Cut the crying from the audio.
Oh yeah. If you're tuning in just now, I actually sobbed for about 20 to 25 minutes at the beginning of this. And YouTube got all of it. So if that's a little, if you're listening right now and you want to hear me cry for half an hour, you better go to YouTube, because I cried for 35 minutes, 47 minutes, something like that. Anyways, here are the
which was a
rankings.
Career high, by the way. That was a career high for Nicole.
Yeah, of all my By the Numbers appearances. And what's my average for all of my tiers? How many individual tiers is my average shed per episode?
I don't really think it's really a volume stat on tiers. I think it's really how hard you cry. So I don't think that the number of tiers at the end of the day matters. It's really just it's the deep cries that really put up numbers, especially in your second season.
Wow. Well, if the stats guy says that it's you can't count the tears, you can only feel the tears, then I guess I'll stop counting my tears and pouring them into a jar at night like usual. I'll give that a rest. Anyways, Here are the power rankings so far for the first 5 episodes of SNL season 48. And I'm going to read out the average. So this one, we like to talk about it cumulatively. So this season, so far, first 5 episodes, just about a quarter of the season in, a little less, a hair less. And here we go. From the top, Keenan, 106.99. Heidi, 106.63. Bowen, 95.52. Ego, 89.99. Chloe, 89.92. Mikey, 73.39. Colin, 72.81. Andrew Dismukes, 72.18. JAJ, 69.88. Cecily, 56.13. Michael Che, 50.10. Sarah Sherman, 47.24. Michael Longfellow, 46.43. Devin Walker, 41.49. Punky Johnson, 39.14. Marcelo Hernandez, 35.25. And Molly Carney, 28.49. So, Eric, I will start with you. What jumps out at you here?
I think what jumps out at me the most is the race that Heidi and Keenan are having right now. I mean, they were killer close last week, and Heidi gained 3 points above Keenan this episode, and that just brought her even closer. So that's amazing, just how close they are. And for those who forgot the numbers already, they are 0.36 apart right now, which is crazy. But I think that, they sort of do fill similar roles in this show. They're both being used pretty well as utility players right now. I think Heidi's actually led more sketches this season on the whole, and I think she might be the cast member I'm most excited about right now. But yeah, that's what sticks out to me. Everything else looks like it's pretty much falling into order with, as far as people's tenure on the show, that's lining up pretty well. Obviously we have Punky's sort of the exception that we're used to seeing, unfortunately, at this point. But yeah, everything else is falling exactly as we'd sort of expect to see it.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to highlight, Eric. Yeah, was the top the 2 races we're looking at, Keenan and Heidi, and then Ego and Chloe right now are 0.07 apart for the 4 and 5 spot. And just as a reminder, I know we get some diehard listeners, but this is takes in appearances, screen time, recurring characters, saying live from New York, prime time, screen time, so much weighted values that equal these numbers. So at the end of the day, when you have like a razor thin margin, talking about midterm elections, we would call Keenan and Heidi, too early to call right now. We'd be waiting for a while for those results. So it always kind of cracks me up that so much data goes into this one stat and they can be that close because, we're 5 episodes in. We've had how many sketches by now and how much time we've watched the show, and it's that close. So yeah, that was exactly what I want to bring up. And this week I added a plus or minus column. So if you've been following us, you can see who's rising and falling in the rankings. Doesn't mean they gained the most points that week over average. It just means that they moved up or down in the rankings. So we have Cecily jumping up 5 spots. So obviously she started at the bottom, missing the first 3 episodes. Now she's in 10th place out of a 17-person cast. So that surprises no one, but that's a big jump. Sarah Sherman went up 2. Marcelo and Jost went up 1. We had Dismukes, Che, and Molly drop 1. And then Devin and Punky drop 3 after a very, very minimal episode contribution from them this week. Nicole?
Yeah, I mean, just to add on to that, something interesting with Devin to point out is he has had his last 2 episodes have been, I think, under 5 seconds, both episodes. Certainly single-digit second episodes, but he had one of the best episodes of anyone, rookie or not, so far of the season in episode 3. His power ranking was 124.94, which is like, if you're looking up at Keenan and Heidi, that's like, above their averages, like a lot above their, 106 plus is their average. So, I mean, for him to have such an incredible 1 episode, then go down. Like just that range is something that I'm noticing. And then, you know, you still see him above his counterparts, Marcelo and Molly, when, you know, you can consider this stat as you take an average, but then you also consider like over time, you know, if someone is pulling up, maybe they're not having those sky high 124s, but, you know, like I'm looking at Molly, for example, and they're pulling numbers like, you know, in the teens and 20s and 30s and 40s, you know, and so I feel like every week pretty much they're making an impact. Whereas Devin has been more, one episode was so good and so memorable, and then the last two we haven't seen as much from him. So that's just interesting with numbers. And we talk about like what type of player do you want to be? And there are so many different, you know, ways to do well at the show. There are people who've been there for years and years who have standout episodes and then aren't really in them. So I find that interesting that his highs are soaring over the other rookies' highs, but then he's also had more objective lows than any of the other rookies. So that's just something I think interesting. And then yeah, Keenan and Heidi. I think that their roles on the show, like Eric said, I feel like they occupy a pretty similar place on the show. And they're like, when you think of dependable, reliable people who are good at making everyone else around them look better and perform better and feel better and all of that stuff, I feel like they both just completely embody that. And so it's good to see two people all the way at the top who also are really good at allowing other people chances to shine. That's just something I'm always interested in with the data, is I think people who are at the tippy top often are not the people who necessarily are at the top of like our MVP polls, because it's people who are on screen a lot and doing a lot, but they're not always in the sort of like the, you know, I'm a star, like that viral audio, you know, if anyone knows what I'm talking about. But like it's nice to see people doing so well who also, you don't leave an episode and feel like, oh, they, you know, took roles from other people. It doesn't feel like that with them really ever. So I feel like that's a healthy place to be with the season. And yeah, I feel like this now that we're looking at 5 episodes, it's really fascinating. I think the biggest thing that I'm interested in is just how we're seeing all these different performances over time, and just like how some people are pulling more gradual and some are up and down and all around. It's cool to see. I feel like by the end of the season, this graphic is just gonna be like every shade of green and red and orange and yellow will be represented in here. It'll be beautiful.
Yeah, thank you for that top tier analysis, Nicole. I think it's also interesting that that top 6 has stayed, and I wanted to just, you know, as we bring up a segment Eric prepared for us, just kind of ask his opinion on if you think in the history of the show, if you've been, I assume you've been watching it for a while, you're a huge fan of it, that do you tend to have more affection for those utility players over the years, or do you kind of like the boom and bust players? Because I've done analytics on those type of players, and who has, you know, not the lowest low and the highest highs, but the most consistent numbers. Because I was looking at Heidi, and this inspired this question for you, because Heidi's numbers were like very Kate McKinnon-esque about putting up 100 plus every episode. So very like LeBron James type of, you know, leading scorer every week type of thing. So I was just curious, and just on a, you know, opinion-based question, but yeah, what do you think, Eric?
Yeah, I think my favorite usually are the utility players who can get their moment. And I think we have a cast almost full of those right now. I think Cecily Cecily's my favorite cast member currently. And I think she occupied that role for a long time. I don't know if she will this season just because of her sort of status on the show. But I think she occupied that. You know, people in the past, like Anna Gasteyer is one of my favorites from that era when she was on. And I think she kind of filled that role. And other current cast members right now who are my favorites, Ego, Heidi, that's what they do right now. I mean, you look at Heidi's they're not Heidi. You look at Ego's numbers from this season, and she had her standout episode with Meg Thee Stallion, and in the last few episodes, she hasn't fallen by the wayside at all, but she's she's stuck around. She's made sure we remember who she is because she's been in sketches, but she hasn't been the star of the show. And I think that's great that she can do that and that other cast members can do that.
Absolutely. And Ego Wodum was the cast leader in screen time following last week's episode, and then Heidi is now. So I think everyone had been clamoring for that. We want the Chloe, Ego, Heidi trio to be that new trio of maybe the Kate 80 Cecily, especially when she was gone for the first 3 episodes. So yeah, I completely agree about that. And we're going to move on to our kind of wild card segment that we do every week, where we do something that we don't do in other shows. And this is something that Eric prepared. So he's going to tell us what we're looking at here.
Yeah, thanks. So earlier this year, I started to gather some statistics on the YouTube data from SNL's YouTube channel. So I wrote a script that'll go and it will pull all of the SNL playlists that they have for the episodes. It will pull the stats for every sketch in that playlist. So it'll have the views, it'll have the likes, it'll have the comments. And there's a lot of interesting stuff you can do with this, but one of the most interesting stats that I created from this was the comment to like ratio. And I think that this is a pretty fair estimation of how controversial a sketch is. If a sketch has a lot of comments and not a lot of likes, that represents a lot of engagement, but it doesn't represent a lot of positive engagement. So I think these are the sketches that are really getting people to talk, but not necessarily talk positively. So here on the screen, we actually have the top 10 sketches sorted by their comments per likes. And I have it by comments per 100 likes, because I think that's prettier to look at, but it's the same thing. So I'll read them out one by one and the comments per likes, and then I'll talk about some general stuff that we can see here. So number 1 is the Try Guys sketch from the Brendan Gleeson episode from this season, and this has 60 comments per likes. Number 2 is the Amy Schumer monologue from season 43, so 5 years ago, at 45 comments per 100 likes. Number 3 is Goober the Clown on abortion with 40 comments per 100 likes. Number 5 is Charmin Bears, again from this season, 39. Number 6 is Most of Villa Senor on the Oscar snubs from season 45 with 29.7. Number 6, Brett Kavanaugh cold open from season 44 with 23. Number 7 is Amy Schumer's monologue from this season with 21.9. Coming in at number 8, we have Ted Cruz Sesame Street cold open with 22 from last season. Gen Z Hospital at number 9 with 21. And then Brooklyn Democratic Debate cold open from season 41, the Julia Louis-Dreyfus episode with 19. So those are the top 10. And I think that kind of the standout thing I'm seeing from this graphic is that we have 3 sketches from this season in the top 10. We have Amy Schumer's monologue, which isn't really a sketch, but it's a video on YouTube, so I'm going to count it. We have the Charmin Bears sketch, which is obviously garnered some controversy due to the plagiarism that has been alleged about it. And then we have the Try Guys sketch, which is at number 1. And I think a lot of that has to do with sort of the idea that they're talking about YouTube stars. And so that's going to get a lot of people on YouTube talking about it. So I know that John mentioned, I think, that when they were doing the Try Guys sketches, or the episode 2 sketch, the episode 2 episodes of this podcast, that he was getting a lot of dislikes. He was getting a lot of negative comments from people who had seen the videos pop up from the Saturday Night Network, and they maybe thought it was SNL, or they wanted to hear the takes on the Try Guys stuff, and it was garnering all sorts of reputation, whether that be positive or negative. So that's just a nice tie into this podcast. But yeah, Mike, Nicole, do you guys have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, first of all, Eric, thanks so much for contributing to the show. Made my prep time easier, and it's great to look at something with fresh eyes. It's just awesome. So I appreciate it very much. I love the idea just because, on this podcast, for this show, By the Numbers, our data is just so heavy with things that we see on the show. So we're getting some data that's related to the show, but that's not literally on the show. So it offers in a whole, fifth dimension to what we're doing, what I appreciate. And I think my take on it is just maybe that, because the easy take might be politics drives clicks. But I think outside politics is that just seeing a little bit of a trend of getting, which I think SNL ultimately wants more than anything, is getting non-SNL fan eyeballs on their content. So when it comes to them producing things that will be blogged about or shared on social media, that might, people are watching it, that, someone from SNL could bump into them in the street and they would have no idea who they are. Like, people like that don't watch the show at all are just, they've heard of SNL. They're seeing that sketch on their news feed and on blogs and things like that. Because I always think it's funny, because I'm so invested in this universe with you guys that I hear every take on things, and then all of a sudden you're on, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, something else outside of SNL, and you see it being talked about. It's kind of like hearing your favorite band at a restaurant. You're like, oh wow, people are talking about this. So that's kind of what I see here, Nicole.
Yeah, I co-sign what Mike said about just thank you for, adding to the show and bringing a totally fresh perspective and stats on stuff that we haven't talked about before. I think this is so fun to mention and to think about, and especially the fifth dimension piece. I'm a huge proponent of just talking about the implications of things and the deeper meanings, and and in this context of I think that's why I love pop culture, because it's not just what happens, it's how people respond to it, and what the PR strategy is about something in pop culture, and what the fan response is to something, and how that really and also with the Dave Chappelle thing, which we're not talking about a lot here, but one thing I will say with it is a big thing about the controversy with Dave Chappelle in general is that he sometimes, I think, he thinks that his comedy can sort of exist in a vacuum, and that you can just watch his specials and go to his shows and take that as gospel. But the piece he's missing is the piece that you have highlighted here, Eric, which is that nothing in 2022 exists in a vacuum. An SNL sketch is not just a take this for face value and decide what you think of it, and then that's the end of it. It's most SNL sketches that carry a lot of value in culture, and transcend the show. Also, a huge part of them are, what is the fan response? How are people reacting to it, talking about it, sharing it, all of those things online, digitally. So for me, this next dimension is the reason SNL still exists. It's the reason it's an important show. It's because of stuff like this, because we can, bring it outside of the show, make it bigger than the show itself. So I just am obsessed with this stuff, and I'm so happy that you brought this here. I can't thank you enough. But yeah, I think your point also is spot on about how the nature of the Try Guys sketch, it was, if the Try Guys sketch was the most controversial sketch that SNL has ever done, then we are kidding ourselves. But I think it is by far the most controversial sketch in terms of the YouTube audience. That, is shown in these stats, and it is, I think, all of our opinion, which is interesting how those two things can be different. But it's because the types of people who would click on a YouTube video or comment on a YouTube video, that is the exact demographic, proportionately, what percentage of each demographic had an opinion about the Try Guys sketch. That demographic had a higher proportion of that demographic had a reaction to the Try Guys sketch than any other demographic in the entire universe, period, about that sketch, which is why, you know, we're seeing this, and it makes so much sense. So that's another interesting thing, thinking about all these platforms, is like, what's the meaning of certain content, you know, on this platform. I would say the same with the Charmin sketch. You know, people share their sketches and their content, and so on YouTube, that type of thing. If someone makes a reaction video to SNL may or may not have taken my idea, here's what I think, you know, stuff like that can carry a big can carry a lot of weight. And then, yeah, I mean, I also just want to point out Gen Z Hospital. It's another one that was controversial. It had Elon Musk in it, but that was one of the least controversial things about it. And I can't believe I'm saying that, because I am not his biggest fan, but his mere presence was not the worst part of that sketch. It was just kind of all over the place. And I don't even know that I would blame him. So, I want to blame him for everything, but I don't think I will for that. So anyways, it's just, yeah, it's funny to see such a mix of things here, like things that are controversial for reasons like the Gen Z Hospital being, you know, Gen Z having a reaction to it, to the Try Guys stuff, and then Amy Schumer's monologues. You know, I think the internet is really harsh on Amy Schumer, and so I'm not surprised by that, but it's also, yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised, but I wish that weren't the case. And then also seeing Goober the Clown on abortion, Cecily's update segment, I wish that weren't so high. But one other thing I'll point out, my last thing is, I think in general, this metric is, I agree, it's if something is more controversial. I also think it can be if there's just a lot of discourse on a thread, you know. So if maybe it's one person going back and forth because they have a strong opinion on something, positive or negative. So I'm sure, you know, and I know because I've looked at them, the Goober the Clown on abortion comments, there are a lot of comments that are, you know, not approving of it. But there are also, for all those comments, there are also a ton that are individual people having like intelligent, well-intentioned, you know, earnest like conversations in these threads, saying their opinions about how they think it's an important message and that Cecily did a beautiful job. And so I think, you know, controversial is the word, because it's just, I would say also just impassioned. I feel like this shows that people have a lot of opinions. And it's just like, you know, these are sketches where people go back to them and time again to say their opinions and to express themselves. So that's, yeah, I mean, this is so fun to think about. Thank you so much again for you know, bringing this to our show to talk about. I love it.
Yeah. And I think, you know, one of my main takeaways from doing all this is definitely, this is often a YouTube specific thing. It you know, it's definitely revolves around that culture, the culture of people who watch YouTube, people who watch SNL on YouTube. It would be awesome to have some kind of, what's the total public discourse statistic for a sketch. Obviously that's impossible to quantify, or, you know, very hard to quantify, due to, you know, a lot of it's probably word of mouth. So that's tough to get, but there's a lot of other sources of data I would like to get in here to you know, improve this. The other thing on Cecily actually is, so we have Goober the Clown on abortion, and one of the other stats I have here is the comments per 100 likes. So it's basically the comment to like ratio, and that was the highest for Cecily's Goober the Clown, actually, compared to all the other sketches. And so, yeah, you're right, Nicole. Like, there is just a ton of discourse, whether it be positive or negative, around that sketch. And then the other point I had was, I wanted to see how Goober stacked up to Tammy the Trucker from this week, to see if that generated the same level of discourse. And it hasn't yet at this point. Tammy the Trucker was ranked 30 across all of the YouTube videos, which is still, I mean, it's really high. I don't remember exactly how many videos there are, but there's got to be over 500. So still pretty high, but and it might climb as as the week goes on and as news of the sketch reaches those who aren't necessarily watching a show. But Cecily's sketch had the advantage of Ben Shapiro talking about it, actually. So the Group of the Clown had the advantage of Ben Shapiro bringing a lot of views to it, whether those be good or not. So just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, and we're going to take a look at one more quick chart from Eric. And just to bridge these two together, also, like, just shout out to the math on the last chart that the Try Guys one was like, what was that, Eric, at a 60, and the next one was in the 40s. So not only was that the first, it was first by a lot. And then just, kind of stating the obvious here, but because I think this is just an interesting topic and one that keeps coming up about SNL's appeal to youth. The show's been on so long, generations have aged into SNL, possibly out of it. People have stayed on, and never got off the train for SNL. But YouTube is a great way to look at that, only because young people are on it very much. So pulled up some YouTube stats, and it says 80% of parents of children under 11 say their kids watch YouTube every day. And 95% of 18 to 29-year-olds use YouTube, and that goes for men and women. 91% of 30 to 49-year-olds use YouTube. So obviously YouTube traction is a good, when they show movies and they do focus groups, they say, like, what did you like? What did you not like? What do you want to see more of? So I'm sure that SNL does look at this, outside of the stats that they see from us. They are probably wondering, the mentions of Pete Davidson's name on Twitter or the hashtags they're getting for a sketch, things like that don't drive comedy, unfortunately, but they do drive interest to the show, which keeps the show on and keeps the show relevant. So we're now going to look at another chart that has just the most viewed sketches of this year. And I think that what I'm talking about the young people appealing sketches might lend some insight to this list too. So take it away, Eric. What do you think of collecting this data, and what did you think when you saw what came out of it?
Yeah. Before I get into the stats, I totally agree, Mike, that it is the young people that are driving it. And that's apparent this season more than any other. One of the things that I've noticed is that usually what you'll see in an episode on YouTube is that the number one or the number two most viewed video, at least for the first month or two, will be either the cold open or it will be the weekend update jokes segment. And that's because a lot of people, they just tune in for the weekend update jokes, or they'll go to the playlist and the cold open is always first on the playlist, and they'll watch the cold open and they might not watch much else. So one of the interesting things this season is that with the exception of Amy Schumer, which, I mean, that episode is 4 days old. So still some time to grow there. But with the exception of Amy Schumer, there is an actual sketch that is in first place for every episode of the season. So I'm gonna go through the top 10 total, but then also keep your ears open for, from episode to episode, what the number one is. So at number one, we have Hot Girl Hospital from Megan Thee Stallion at 2.4 million. Also at 2.4, just under, is Try Guys from Brendan Gleeson. Another Megan Thee Stallion, we have the cold open, the Jan 6th final hearing, which is at 2.36. Then from Jack Harlow, we have the Kanye Skechers commercial at 2.35. Then also Jack Harlow, we have the weekend update jokes segment, also at 2.35-ish. Then from Miles Teller, we have Be Real at 2.2. Brendan Gleeson, we have the weekend update jokes at 2.16. Megan Thee Stallion, again, we have Classroom at 2.05 million. And then Amy Schumer, we have the Weekend Update jokes at 2 million. And then in last, we have Jack Harlow, David S. Pumpkins Returns. Sorry, David Pumpkins Returns is the name of the sketch at 1.89 million. So yeah, Megan Thee Stallion is sort of winning, at least as far as this list goes in terms of views, and I think that makes sense. Hot Girl Hospital. I'm not necessarily going to speak to why a lot of people are watching that one, but I have some suspicions. And Try Guys, of course, makes sense as to why that's so high. I want to point out the Kanye Skechers commercial as well, which is at number 4. I was talking to one of my friends who does not watch SNL, and he brought this sketch up. So that's just I try to keep my ears open for that sort of thing. And, Mike spoke before as it's kind of like, I don't remember the analogy you made, Mike, exactly, but it was a, one of those things that I was tracking. So
yeah, I was saying when you hear your favorite band or artist, like
that's right.
outside your own usage, you're like, even if it's their number one hit, you're still excited to hear it. Yeah. And I had a point on the Kanye Skechers commercial too, because when I try to start doing my data analysis on the shows as quickly as possible, because it takes a while. And so I get I write down the rundown as I watch often, and then I'll, I kind of get the outline going so I can start plugging in screen time data. And this was actually renamed on YouTube. It was Skechers commercial, and then it was renamed Kanye Skechers commercial, which I thought was interesting because I had taken it from YouTube, all the sketch names. So I don't want to name them myself. So I write them all down as they're posted that night between, 12 and 2 a.m. They start to upload them. And when I went back, I was like, oh, I didn't write down Kanye Skechers commercial. I just wrote down Skechers commercial. So I think that was very intentional to be like, hey, this isn't just a sneaker ad. Like, this is making fun of Kanye. So click on it, please. So I thought that was definitely an intentional move by SNL YouTube page. So things like that, again, we're talking about getting that traction online. Online is a whole new space for this show that existed very successfully before the internet was even conceived. So it is interesting to see those trends. Nicole, do you have any takes on just either the hosts, so we're seeing kind of more millennial Gen Z hosts, or just these sketches in particular?
Yeah, I mean, I could not agree more about the adding Kanye. It's just, I feel like it comes down to the SEO of it all, like Skechers commercial versus having the word Kanye in it, especially these last few weeks. Just having Kanye in anything, whether you have a platform or not, will get it noticed. And so when you have such a platform as SNL, as simple as that, just throwing those words in and it makes sense. But then also you have the sketch, Be Real, one word. It sounds like 2 words, but it is one word, as is the app. And it's sometimes SEO favors that, I mean, on a meta level, we have these conversations for the podcast, John and I all the time. There is so much art and science to these SEO things. And sometimes having that one word of just be real, that really values the word be real, so that when people search be real, this is going to be the first thing that comes up, because that word will be valued so much because it's the only word in the title. Whereas Kanye Skechers commercial. Yeah.
Nicole, can you tell the folks at home what SEO is?
Yeah. So search engine optimization. So it's when you search something, in any search engine. I mean, I'm applying the term in general to just online in general, if you're searching on Google or Instagram or Twitter, I'm sort of co-opting the term, just throwing it everywhere. But basically, when you search something, or even something else I find interesting, when you're tweeting, if I'm live tweeting, if Euphoria, for example, this was something my friends would make fun of me. We would do Euphoria Sundays and watch the episodes live, and I would be sitting in the corner on my computer live tweeting, because that's who I am. I like to be like that. And there's so much to be said for just having the word euphoria in your tweet when there are like millions of hits with that word, you know, when Euphoria was overpowering the whole wide world. But then also with SEO, like, or with Twitter specifically, it's interesting with, you know, like how sometimes not having the right words will draw people's attention more too. If you don't say a buzzword, but it captures people faster because you use fewer words to get your point across. All that stuff is interesting. So anyway, yeah, just in SEO, just in general, like when you search something, how these algorithms pick it up, don't pick it up, what's valued, what's not valued. It's like just from, you know, a business perspective, it's something that SNL has to think about. It's something that we think about at the podcast. It's really interesting and really important. So I'm looking at all these titles and like, you know, I see that. Also, the main thing I'm surprised at is Hot Girl Hospital really went up. Like it was not, when I looked at these, like, you know, 24, 36 hours after the episode, Hot Girl Hospital was not like zooming like this. So it's interesting. I think the ones that are very like news cycle driven, like Try Guys, like Cold Opens, like Weekend Update, those are gonna, like exactly like you said, Eric, those are have the most views instantly because it's the news. It's again SEO. If you search for something, it's gonna be there because it's in the news and it's trending. And then I think the ones that are a little bit more evergreen, like Hot Girl Hospital, was more of just like if you're a Meg Thee Stallion fan, you know, you want to go back and watch that sketch at any point because it just so embodies Meg Thee Stallion and her humor and her brand. So that one, I feel like it makes sense that it will continue to gain views, whereas the more news specific ones will grow at a slower rate, even if they continue to grow, or if that news item is back in the news, you know, those videos will get a bump, stuff like that. But yeah, this is so interesting, and it's turning on the side of my brain where John and I have these conversations all the time about the podcast, very behind the scenes, by the numbers episode we've had today. But yeah, we talk about this stuff all the time, and it's interesting, and the internet is a monster, but a beautiful monster is my main point, I think.
Yeah, that's great. And I just want to point out that you know, as you talk about search engine optimization, 3 of these titles contain the words Kanye West or Kanye. 2 of the Weekend Update titles. So whenever SNL does their Weekend Update joke segment, they always include a couple of buzzwords in the title. So one of them has Elon Musk and Kanye West. The other one has Donald Trump Jr. and Kanye West. I don't even remember what the Donald Trump Jr. joke was in this episode. But it's mentioned in the title of the Weekend Update. So just to draw those people in. And YouTube also, you can also get the tags of the videos. So that's another really interesting thing to look at. I think the most embarrassing one I found was on some of the Donald Trump sketches, they had a Make America Great Again tag. So people who were specifically searching that on YouTube would see those sketches. So a lot of weird stuff going on behind the scenes there, but just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, the tags, that's a whole other beast that is also really important, like with getting your stuff viewed on YouTube. Also, I think this is a wider conversation, but I feel like YouTube really values that stuff in a more consistent fashion than other platforms. Sometimes, like Twitter, again, feels so random with Euphoria. Like the tweets that were just like completely gibberish, but somehow were universal at the same time, didn't have any keywords in them, were just like a live tweet about the episode. Those were the most viral ones. And then the next viral ones were the ones that would do hashtag Euphoria HBO. So if you go click the hashtag, you see them. But like, there's something to be said sometimes. Again, as data people, you know, there's also the other side where if you just appeal to someone's like instinct and you just say something without the pretense of hashtag, like sometimes that hits faster. So this is so interesting. I'm like loving it. But I think that's a great note. Any final thoughts about this one before we turn to Patreon ratings?
Yeah, I had a wrap up thought. Just I wanted to just real quick bring up the inverse of what we just talked about, which is talking about SEO and, very clicky things to put in titles is, I think it's a testament to just good comedy and good sketch. At the end of the day, that's what we want to see, right? We don't want SNL to be a cesspool of social media hashtags. We want good comedy.
Mhm.
And I've been really hyping up this classroom sketch, which is the 10-1 from the Megan Thee Stallion. And so that one is literally could not be plainer. It is called Classroom. It's not even like you would have don't know the host is anything about it, no pop culture references. And so Eric, I'd be interested is to see this list over a few seasons without that buzzwordy things, because you might actually get some like, hey, I just laughed at this sketch and I wanted to show my friend this sketch, not like it's being blogged about because it's controversial like your last chart. So I think that could be something that relates it back to the show and not the reaction to the show, is that it's really hard and we tend to shy away from being subjective about the comedy on this By the Numbers podcast, because that's the whole point, is to be objective about it. But that might be a way to crack the code a little bit. It's just find like sketches that are just sketches that are shared by friends or, rewatched because they're really funny.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to the future where I have this data over time. I mean, right now I have it basically, I'm pulling it pretty constantly over 5 weeks, but one day I'll have it for a full year, and it'll be really great to see what sketches just has that constant growth throughout that time period.
Yeah. I totally agree, Mike, about the classroom sketch. That's how if something is on this top 10 list and it does not have Kanye in it, it does not have Try Guys in it, it doesn't have something that people were frantically searching for at some point in time, that means that it is an amazing, pure, funny sketch that just resonates with people, which is like, I feel like deserves extra points. For something to just be called Classroom and have a spot on this list, that is a good sketch that people on that visceral, emotional, human level are just enjoying and clicking and sharing and loving and valuing, and like at a higher rate than they are anything else, because the algorithms, like if something has these keywords in it, then people do not have to try guys. People don't have to try as hard for every view on this list. Anything where something was trending, there's like the human effort rate, we could create some metric, is lower on something where it was a viral topic, so like anything that there isn't a viral topic around, that deserves extra points because of that like human effort variable kind of thing. So it's just, that stuff is so interesting too, because it's not being fed to people just by virtue of it being the trend or the search button, whatever. So I could talk about this forever, but but that's why we just have to have you back on, Eric, and we'll keep talking all the time. This is so fun.
And we're gonna go to our patron rankings, wrap up the show right now. And this is our first time we've ever had a patron on our show. So we've loved having Eric tonight. And I'll just, want to throw to you, ask if you had a favorite sketch, and then ask if, you're somebody who, with our patrons, ranks the cast each week, because next week, before we have a break, I'm going to look at how the patrons have ranked over time, because I'm interested to see what they think.
Yeah, I try to rank every week. This week I did not find the time, unfortunately. It looks like you have 4 rankings, just based on your averages here. But my favorite sketch this week, I think, was actually the big penis therapy sketch. I think John had the take that it might be the sketch of the season, and I'm inclined to agree. I think the way they were able to balance sort of the subtlety of the message on, why he was in therapy, how he was convinced to go to therapy, how Amy was really trying to steer the conversation away from him realizing Howie was convinced to go to therapy. I thought it was a really clever sketch. And I thought it was well done, well acted overall. So that was my favorite sketch of the night, and I'm really glad to see Dismukes at the top of this list as probably a result of that sketch. So, yep.
Yeah, I love a good Dismukes sketch. I thought it reminded me of the Steve's Beanie Babies sketch from last season with Lizzo.
Yeah, I'll just read these off. We don't always read them off. Let us know if you like to hear. We try to like incorporate the patron ratings into the conversation, but we're trying different things this week, so I'll just read these off. So we have Dismukes and Cecily at 8.5, tied for the highest ranking. Then we have Heidi at 8. Then we have JJ, Sarah, and Keenan at a three-way tie at 7.25. Michael Longfellow and Ego Wodum both got 7. Chloe at 6.5, and then Colin Jost and Bowen Yang both at 6.25. Mikey Day and Marcelo both at 6. Michael Che at 5.5. Molly Carney at 5. Punky at 4.5, and then Devin Walker at 3. So that is just something that sticks out to me is consistent with their screen time. Punky and Devin had the least screen time, and they're at the bottom of these patron rankings. Also, of course, I mean, my favorite stat that I somehow bring up every week here on the list of things that come up every week is Sarah's ratio of like how high she scores versus her screen time is always never ceases to amaze me how she's always high up on any subjective rankings, despite when she's not at the top of just pure screen time and pure power rankings. So that's always fun to see. And then Dismukes, I would say the same thing. He really, he's right up there. Like Cecily had more screen time than anyone, this season in general. And for him to be tied with her is, he made the most of his time this week. And so that's always, I think the best place you can be is not necessarily at the top of the pure screen time, pure power rankings, but pretty close up high on those and really high up on these subjective rankings, because that means the people are rooting for you, fighting for you, talking about you online. Again, the value of this online discourse that we talked about. Like, I just think that's the best place to be at is people always wanting to see more of you and talking about it, expressing it on our show, online, on Twitter, whatever it is. So, those are my 2 cents. And any other thoughts on here, or we're good?
Good to go.
I guess this term Mike likes to throw around, the impact player of the week. I would say Dismukes. Him and Cecily are tied, but for me, he would just on this rankings. I think he would take that award just by virtue of him making the most value of his screen time, right?
Yeah, under 5 minutes in screen time compared to Cecily with the over 12 minutes of screen time. So them to have the same score at the end of the night, that just definitely shows impact. And yeah, Sarah actually was like right in line with her power ranking. That one lined up. And then, yeah, I guess, I mean, JJ and Keenan were a little maybe lower because, I mean, it's very close. But yeah, I'm always interested to see the how far apart Jost and Shay are, because they always often get very different screen times. So I guess it depends on if they made you laugh that night or not.
Yep. And see, here I am thinking that Sarah was higher on this ranking. And it's because of my point in general of that, like, always wanting someone to root for thing of like this, in general, when people always perform well on these rankings, it's so ingrained in me to be like, see how cool that is. And like, I just think, yeah, that's a sweet spot for anybody to be in. So,
and this was the second best episode of JJ's career stat-wise. I forget if I said that, but
wow.
So I like how, and I think because Eric brought this up very early in tonight's show, is that he actually did play Biden and Trump in this episode, and I think they're probably his 2 most forgettable. Not to end on a negative a take here, but like that news sketch that they did in this show, I thought was like pretty bad, but I rewatched it we talk about rewatching, and JJ was the only person who made me laugh in that sketch. So just his like kind of weird character with the wig on, and I was like, we might think of Bowen and Sarah as doing that stuff often, but seeing JJ do it was fun. And so, yeah, it was usually we think of JJ as being pigeonholed as the cold open hero playing either the current or former president, and that's what he does. But he was, the father in the Looker pre-tape, and he was the voice of the Looker. So there's a lot that he can do, and he had a really good episode stat-wise. So that's my shout out to JJ before we say goodnight.
Yeah. Well, Eric, thank you so much for being here and for contributing. This was so much fun, and you're welcome back anytime. This was amazing. So let everyone know where they can find you and also how you're feeling. We got your thermostat on so far in the season, and what's your we'll figure out another pun for therma forward.
Yeah,
we'll get there. How are you feeling going forward?
Temperature forecast, maybe.
There it is.
I don't know. Thank you guys so much for having me. This was a blast. Really hope to be back at some point. You guys. As for my temperature forecast, when I saw the announcement for Dave Chappelle on the live show, my immediate reaction was, "Oh yes, it's Dave Chappelle." And then I remember all the baggage that comes with Dave Chappelle. So I would say I'm cautiously optimistic right now about next week. I think hopefully they can leave the controversy behind them. Hopefully he doesn't impact the mood of the cast too much on the show. So cautiously optimistic is my forecast. Thanks again for having me, you guys. If anyone is interested in some more of the statistics that I gather and report on, you can find me on Twitter or Instagram at SNLlytics. That is analytics with an SNL instead of the ANAL. So that is where you can find me. And thanks again, you guys, for having me.
Our pleasure. And Mike, where can the people find you, and what is your forecast?
Forecast is SNL will air on time, 11:30 p.m. It will be hosted by Dave Chappelle. That's my forecast. I'm looking forward to it. And you can find me at SNL Mike Murray. And we, again, 200 shows. Big round of applause to John Schneider. Big round of applause to all our awesome podcasters, guests, and viewers, lookers, watchers, whatever. All those people that do make what we do possible. So here's the next 200. We're on a quick pace. We're doing 4 shows a week. So we'll get to 400 pretty soon. We'll be here next week to cover that next episode with John. So tune in next week. Thanks, Eric, for being here. Thanks, Nicole, for co-hosting the show with me. It was my pleasure. All the times we cried during the show will be edited out, but they will remain on YouTube.
Yeah.
So check them out. It's a top tier episode. It's a bottom tier episode. And where can we reach out to you? And let's say goodnight.
I already got special privileges from YouTube since I advertised their SEO, how amazing they are. They already got in touch with me and said they can edit out my crying. So actually you had to watch this live to enjoy my 40 to 45 minutes of crying that I did on this episode. So if you're here now and you weren't live with us, then that is something that you missed. And I guess next time you'll just have to tune in live and you will hear my tears. And thank you so much to YouTube. That was really quick response time. It's not even, business hours. That's amazing. I couldn't thank you more. And I will continue, to talk about SEO all the time. Thank you. For legal reasons. Am I joking? Mix around those words. Joke is it a. Anyway, I also am very happy. 200 episodes. Thank you, everyone who's been following along in any way, whether you watch on YouTube, you listen on audio, you love what we do on Instagram or on TikTok or on Twitter, anywhere, or on Reddit. Shout out to Reddit. I feel like I gotta shout out everybody who loves our stuff on Reddit. That's an amazing community over there. So thank you, everyone there. My forecast, I have very mixed feelings about Dave Chappelle. Like I said, I think My biggest problem is that he's stubborn about how he thinks that his comedy can exist in a vacuum, and that people's opinions are not inherently a part of the art itself. I think that's just something he has to learn because it's 2022. Like, that is just the way it is now. However, what I'm really excited about, if it's anything like his last showing, I think he's going to have a really long monologue, appear a few times, and then it could be a really great cast showcase episode. You know, I don't think that Dave is going to be in everything. It's just judging on his last episode. I think that we could get a lot of really fun cast-driven content this week, and I would love to see that. I think we have so many people who we have to highlight and spotlight, and so that'll be really amazing to see. I feel very confident about that. That's my forecast. I would be very surprised if that did not come true, because just think about it. You know, he's going to give us a long monologue. He's going to pop in, make some jokes throughout the episode, and he'll give space for other people and, you know, take his breaks and hang out. That's just what he's going to do. Anyways, you can also, of course, as always, follow us at the SNL Network everywhere. You can follow me at Nicole Rovine everywhere. Press buttons to rate and review and comment and like, you know, SEO, YouTube, algorithms, everything we talked about today. We really do appreciate it for reasons we discussed. So thank you so much, everyone, and we will see you next time. Bye.